according to St. John, the 15th chapter. Jesus said, "When the Helper comes, whom I will send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth, who proceeds from the Father, he will bear witness about me. And you also will bear witness, because you have been with me from the beginning. I did not say these things to you from the beginning because I was with you, but now I am going to him who sent me, and none of you asks me, 'Where are you going?' But because I have said these things to you, sorrow has filled your heart. Nevertheless, I tell you the truth. It is to your advantage that I go away. For if I do not go away, the Helper will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you. And when he comes, he will convict the world concerning sin and righteousness and judgment. Concerning sin, because they do not believe in me. Concerning righteousness, because I go to the Father, and you will see me no longer. Concerning judgment, because the ruler of this world is judged. I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. When the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all the truth, for he will not speak on his own authority, but whatever he hears, he will speak. And he will declare to you the things that are to come. He will glorify me, for he will take what is mine and declare it to you. All that the Father has is mine. Therefore I said that he will take what is mine and declare it to you. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Well, Pentecost Sunday is kind of the birthday of the church. It's celebrated around the world by Christians of many denominations, not just Lutherans, but Catholics, Anglicans, all manner of denominations and Christians celebrate this day. And it's kind of 50 days after Easter. I was hearing that it's also the feast of first fruits of the grain. In other words, it was a harvest feast, and it's interesting how we can see that God is bringing a harvest of people on this day, and so it marks the beginning of the church. So it's kind of the birthday of the church. It also marks the beginning of the mission given to the church to spread the message of Christ around the world to all people. And we remember the Holy Spirit is the third person of the Holy Trinity, right? Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. As Christians, we believe there's one God eternally existing in three persons, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the Holy Trinity. Next Sunday will be Trinity Sunday, and so we'll have a chance to revisit the Athanasian Creed and how it, in a very wonderful way, explains that important central doctrine of Christianity. And so the Holy Spirit is the third person of the Holy Trinity. The Holy Spirit is omnipresent, present everywhere. It's one of the attributes of God. It's omniscient, knows all things, and is omnipotent, is all powerful. And we see in Psalm 139 that we read in our earlier today, it says, "Where can I go from your Spirit?" We see the omnipresence of the Spirit. And so we see these attributes of God, the third person of the Holy Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit share these attributes: omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. Christ had promised to send the Holy Spirit to the church, and in fact, in several places, and in John chapter 20, he even breathed on the disciples the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit, where the Holy Spirit is, there is life, brings life. In Genesis 1, for example, the very first chapter and the very first verse, first and second verses of the book of Genesis, it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters." We see there at the very beginning that the Holy Spirit was there, bringing order out of chaos. In other words, chaos to cosmos, right? Order, and out of what was broken, what was not functioning well, brought order. We see also in our Old Testament reading that we read from Ezekiel about the dry bones, how, again, where the Spirit is, there is life, brought back life. And so where the Spirit is, there is life, there is renewal, and there are good things. The Spirit brings renewal into the lives of those that receive the Spirit. And we hear about the gifts of the Spirit given to believers, and we'll, over the next few weeks, as we enter into the Pentecost season, see all of the ways that the Spirit works in the church and works in individual lives as well. The Spirit equips the church for what the mission needs, the purpose for why we're here. We serve one another, the gifts of love, gifts of the Spirit, and the mission of the church. And we see that Jesus promises the Spirit in our reading today. When the Helper comes, whom I will send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth, who proceeds from the Father, he will bear witness about me. So we see that word in Greek, it's parakletos, the paraclete. It's a lot of different ways to translate it. It's kind of a complex word. Not just one word kind of fits, but the counselor, the helper, the paraclete. And the Spirit will equip and will reveal, will inspire all of these things, those that to whom the Spirit comes. And so Jesus in John chapter 20, he commissions the disciples to make disciples, and he breathes on them the Holy Spirit. And we hear the saying that we are one in the Spirit, right? The unity that we have of faith, unity by faith. We're united by the Holy Spirit, who awakens our faith. In fact, the fact that we exercise faith, we have faith, is a work of the Spirit in us, awakening us and helping us to understand and opening us up to the things of God. And faith is one of the gifts of the Spirit. That's why the preaching of the Word, the sacraments, is so important. And that's one of the tasks of the church, to be that voice, sharing the good Word. We see the Holy Spirit working among us and for the benefit of others and bringing them to faith. And that commission that Jesus gave us, that we read about in Matthew 28, where Jesus said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." We see that the mission of the church that Christ has commissioned us to, we're empowered by the Holy Spirit to do so. And we share the Word, we share the sacraments, the means by which, the means of grace through which the Holy Spirit works in the lives of those who hear and who respond. So, we see the importance of the Holy Spirit in the mission of the church. We have a commission and a mission, okay? Hopefully not a commission and an omission, right? Or how do they say, we're chosen but frozen, right? We're to go into all the world, right? We're chosen but to go out into the world, not chosen and frozen, right? The church is to be the people of God that has a mission, that has a purpose, that has a message to share with others. We have a commission and a mission. So it's a great commission, not the great omission, right? As part of who we are as Christians, we're to share the good news and not be the frozen chosen. In other words, that's what I'm trying to say. And so we read Acts chapter 2, and it gives us that wonderful narrative there in the book of Acts where we see the coming of the Holy Spirit. It says, when the day of Pentecost arrived, they were all gathered in one place. And suddenly there came from heaven a sound like a mighty rushing wind, and it filled the entire house and where they were sitting. And divided tongues as of fire appeared on them and rested on each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. So you see this amazing setting where they're together in one place. And again, the action comes from the part of God. He comes upon them, the Holy Spirit comes upon them, and they begin, it manifested in what looked to them like fire, and they began to speak in other tongues. Now, why do they begin to speak in other tongues? Well, we see how in the Old Testament, Babel, the Tower of Babel, it was people began to speak in other tongues, but were dispersed. Here they're brought together, and they're speaking other tongues, other languages, because it's to bring others to knowledge of the truth, of the gospel. And so the early church, we see here, was equipped with this task of evangelism, and God equipped them to be able to communicate that message to those around them. And we see that it's literally languages here. It says, now there were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout men from every nation under heaven. And at this sound the multitude came together, and they were bewildered, because each one was hearing them speak in his own language. How could these Galileans, these people from Galilee, all of a sudden be speaking these other languages? And they were all, it says that they were all amazed and astonished. It says, are not all of these who speaking Galileans? How is it that we hear each of us in their own native language? It says, Parthians and Medes and Elamites and residents of Mesopotamia. So we're talking about places east of Jerusalem, right? The Middle East. And so you have the Middle East, you have Persia and Iran and all these places that we hear of today. The Elamites and the residents of Mesopotamia, in other words, what's today Iraq and Syria, and Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia. These are now areas that are today part of Turkey, that area. So we're talking about east and now going west from Jerusalem. And it says Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, so now south. Parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, visitors from Rome. In other words, all the way to Rome, which was sort of the center there of the Mediterranean world, and it was also the political center of the Roman Empire. So we see how all of these languages from these areas all around them were now being spoken of here. In other words, in some ways, God was saying that this message is to be preached so that those from around the world would hear and come to faith. So we see, in a sense, a reversal of Babel, because Babel dispersed people, but this is bringing people together. And so, and it continues, as both Jews and proselytes and Cretans and Arabians, we hear them telling in their own tongues the mighty works of God. It says, and all were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, what does this mean? But others said mockingly, they are filled with new wine. It says, what does this mean? What does this mean for us? Well, we're to go to all nations, as we said in Matthew chapter 28. And then it says here, but Peter, standing with the 11, lifted up his voice. So now we see Peter, right after this, he begins to preach. And remember, this is the same Peter that denied Christ 3 times, right? And that was in hiding. And so now we see him boldly standing with the 11, lifted up his voice and addressed them. He said, men of Judea, and all of you that dwell in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and give ear to my words. For these men are not drunk, as you suppose, since it is only the 3rd hour of the day. But this is what was uttered by the prophet Joel. So he's actually saying, what you see here happening before you is not something that was not prophesied about, but rather is a fulfillment of what the prophet Joel had said. And it goes back to the Old Testament, right, to the book of Joel, to the prophet Joel. He says, in the last days it shall be, God declares, that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. In other words, the day of Pentecost here is prophesied that something amazing is going to happen, that God will pour out his spirit on those that are there, and that they shall prophesy, they shall share the news, and have visions, have ideas of going out into all the world and sharing this good news. He says, even on my male servants and female servants and all those I will pour out my spirit, and shall prophesy on all people. And this is that, and I will show wonders in the heavens above and in the signs on the earth below, blood and fire, vapor and smoke. Now it shifts here from the day of Pentecost to the day of judgment, right? It says, the sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon to blood before the day of the Lord comes, a great and magnificent day. And it shall come to pass that everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Excuse me. So we have that beginning of the message of Joel is a message of Pentecost. God commissions, God empowers to share the good news. And we have that second part, which is the day of judgment. I guess you can say somewhere in the middle of those two ideas, there's a little dash or a parenthesis, right? That's where we are. We're in that sort of day where Pentecost has happened, and the church is here because of the day of Pentecost. The Spirit dwells among us and with us and in us, and we're to go out into the world and preach the good news. And we know that the day of judgment is coming. It's not here yet, but is coming. But while we're here, we're to be pay heed to that mission that Christ has commissioned us to go out into all the world, share the good news, baptize and teach the truth of the faith. And so here we are, empowered by the Spirit, right? We have received a commission, we have a mission, not an omission, but a commission. And we are not to be the frozen chosen, but I'm trying to find something that rhymes with evangelist, but that's a long word. But it won't work. But we're to be faithful to the task that Christ has called us to the mission that he's empowered us to share that good news with others. And we are fortunate people to have had the love of God lavished on us and tend to be brought into faith and to experience the joys of being in faith.